Call of the Night was an anime that initially I thought I was going to hate. From the character designs, previews of the anime, to the reviews from fans of the series, all of these things were screaming to me that this was an anime for Coomers. Anime that appeals to extremely horny individuals offering plenty of fan service and nothing more. And this anime is certainly heavy on the fan service. I don't think anyone will be denying that. It feels as though every 2 minutes the anime asks me to stand up and do a boner check. I mean, just look at the main heroine. Her outfit, the hairstyle, sharing the same voice actress as my favorite character of all time. Best VA in the industry, by the way. Nobody doing it like her. To her playful demeanor whenever she's on screen, Nazuna feels like she was created in a lab, combining all the things I'm into to consistently fire off all the neurons in my brain that make me find her attractive. The anime is extremely lewd, and there's nothing exactly wrong with that. I've been there before too. At my lowest point in life while waiting for a second season of High School DxD, I went ahead and read the light novel and got the pages in between my book all sticky. No pictures required, straight words were enough to arouse me. But as I grew older, these ecchi anime no longer appealed to me. Eventually, I no longer wish to be horny anymore, but to simply be happy. Of course, every now and again the dog in me comes out, but that's just basic human nature. For the most part, the old me that would love the fan service moments in something like Fire Force, for example, was long gone. Now I watch them with a blank expression, feeling nothing. All of the previews and reviews of the anime really don't do it justice. While sexual tones are a big part of Call of the Night, this anime offers so much more than that. Good animation, interesting characters, witty dialogue, and banner music provided to you by CreepyNuts. The anime is very well put together and is just an overall amazing anime to vibe to. It's probably one of the best series I can think of that captures that feeling of escapism. You sit back, relax, and just enjoy the ride. It paints the nighttime in this beautiful light, managing to capture all the feelings of why I always prefer the nighttime to the morning while crafting this world that feels so real, managing to convince you that you'd love to live here. I think it's pretty good. But I think the most interesting about Call of the Night to me is how much better I think it is in every way compared to the author's previous work, Dagashi Kashi. Because the reason I judged Call of the Night so harshly initially is directly caused by Dagashi Kashi. All of the things I just mentioned about a fan service anime that doesn't really have anything else going on for it is essentially what Dagashi Kashi is. Despite watching 2 seasons of the thing, I struggle to even say anything about this anime other than these two were cool, I guess. It was mildly entertaining when I was watching it, but there's nothing remarkable about it. It's a bit harsh to say, but this anime was a waste of time for me. While if I wasn't familiar with the author Kotoyama and their previous work, I'm sure I would still enjoy Call of the Night because it's simply put, a very good anime. But because I have watched all of Dagashi Kashi beforehand, I'm able to have a greater appreciation for Call of the Night. I feel as though Call of the Night is so good because of Dagashi Kashi. Where Dagashi fails, Call of the Night succeeds. And it's not like this series is bad. It was fairly successful in its own right, but it was missing a few things here and there that ultimately made the series average in my opinion. You can tell Kotoyama took what they learned from their previous work and applied that to Call of the Night, resulting in something very special. So rather than focus on what I like so much about Call of the Night, because there's a lot, I rather highlight the many things I think it does better than what came before it. This series is fascinating to me because I feel as though for a good handful of manga authors, when they conclude their series and move on to their next project, their new work ends up being completely different from what they previously worked on. Not every time, mind you, but I think of how Tai Kubo finished Bleach and then went on to make Witch Watch. The difference is night and day. Take Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter for example, both shonen but very different in their execution. Call of the Night in my opinion feels more like a redo of Dagashi Kashi in a way. They're certainly different, but they have a lot of similarities. Both star a bland protagonist, extremely attractive and outgoing main heroine that turns the main character's life upside down, an abundance of adult jokes, simple premise where things don't progress much early on, the list goes on and on. The execution, as well as the minute changes that this series made, are what makes Call of the Night superior over what came before it, and probably the biggest difference between these two is how they are both structured. Dagashi is what I would consider a gag series. Each chapter in the manga is roughly around 11 or so pages, and each follows a similar formula. They'll talk and advertise whatever candy it is they'll be eating this episode, they'll play games and say some jokes, and then the skit will end. And while the anime has its own set of problems, like making the show run for 20 minutes when it really doesn't need to, which is the reason why season 2 ended up being better when they cut the runtime in half, this rinse and repeat formula is generally how the series goes up until the final chapter. Dagashi Kashi is an anime that gets old very quickly. They have a handful of jokes they can make, and the series is basically them recycling the same jokes over and over until the end. It's an anime that you'll know within the first 10 minutes if you'll end up liking it or not, because they never really shake up this formula. That's kind of how I feel about the comedy in Dagashi Kashi. You could only watch the guys want to see Hojoro's panties, Hojoro do some bondage play, or watch her come out of the bath so many times before it becomes distasteful. The series tries extremely hard to be funny because the series at its core is a comedy. It kind of has to be doing this, especially coming from something like a GOG manga that needs to set up the joke and deliver the punchline in such a short amount of time. The repetitive jokes are a staple in long-running GOG manga, and this one isn't even bad when compared to some other works in the genre. Keep in mind to take everything I just said with a grain of salt. A lot of my complaints about Dagashi Kashi with its small cast of characters, ecchi jokes, and repetitive nature are all also elements that one of my favorite anime has, because comedy is subjective, and if you find this anime funny, there's nothing wrong with that. I'll admit, I just don't think this anime is funny. The over-reliance on dirty jokes is something I can only handle so much of, and this is even something I don't like about Call of the Night. It could be even worse depending on who you're asking. Every time he gets his blood sucked, they make it look like it feels better than sex, and in this series, characters even end up going to love hotels together for crying out loud. But the difference between these two is that Call of the Night isn't a comedy anime. Where Dagashi Kashi relies very heavily on comedy, Call of the Night doesn't focus on one thing, but rather many things all at once. Drama, romance, the supernatural. People don't even typically label it a comedy even though it has jokes here and there. There's so much going on here that it's actually hard to even label it under one genre. Most people will probably label it a romance, but this is a series where the main protagonist is trying to discover how to love someone rather than working towards confessing his feelings. It feels more like a coming-of-age story with splashes of romance and the supernatural involved. Call of the Night got a little bit of something for everyone. It's a mixed bag. I think Call of the Night managed to be this way because Kotayama decided to change things up and make the chapters longer, hitting that average of about 18 pages per chapter, now resembling a more traditional manga. A setup where a kid meets a vampire and has to fall in love with her in order to become one himself. I can easily see this as a GOG manga setting like Dagashi Kashi, where each new chapter will have one of the two characters trying to deepen their relationship, while having the romantic feelings towards each other move at a snail's pace to keep the story going for as long as possible. It's not 100%, but this romantic comedy setup can even be compared to something like Kaguya-sama, as that's kind of how that anime functions, and it's in fact great. You can even see some of this in the earliest parts of Call of the Night. Something like the pool episode is a great example. It doesn't really progress the story or characters further unlike some of the earlier episodes, but it's a fun little side adventure the characters go on that shows how their relationship has progressed so far. I'd obviously never complain about a Nazuna swimsuit episode, please in fact give me more. I really feel like the increased page length for the manga did this series wonders. Even if you don't read the manga, you can still feel it in the anime. Dagashi is fast-paced, trying to tell the joke and give you the punchline as soon as possible. Characters even talk too fast at times because of this. While Call of the Night is much slower and more relaxed, they don't talk nearly as fast. Their conversations are much more casual and natural. They'll just be walking around this town that's mostly dead at night, talking and vibing. At least early on, outside of Nazuna, a lot of the cast isn't even over the top animated. They all feel so chill and real, like if you went outside after midnight, you'd run into these people. This ties into another thing I think Call of the Night does infinitely better, and that is the world. A critique I would have about Dagashi Kashi is that this town looks absolutely miserable to live in. It looks mind-numbingly boring. The most exciting thing they have going on is a convenience store that opened up in town. No one visits the candy shop, and worst of all, you almost never even see anyone walking the streets. It quite literally feels like the world in this show revolves around this cast of 5 to 7 characters because it effectively does. Even something minor like how in Call of the Night you see the same recurring 3 drunk guys on the street, both when they're blackout drunk and before they become intoxicated, adds something of value. When in Dagashi, the kids that visit the store are either different every time or have so little personality and importance given to them that you can't tell who's visiting the store. They might as well be named Child A and Child B on the wiki. The town feels like a very basic copy and paste town out in the boonies rather than an actual place people live in. A small town where the most exciting thing going on is a convenience store, while the story mainly focuses on the main cast of characters, shares a striking resemblance to the game Persona 4. They're basically the same setting, but in Persona's case they managed to sell you on the idea of this being a real place, spending time fishing at the river, working part-time at a hospital, leveling up relationships with various side characters that serve zero importance to the overall plot of the story, walking around the shopping district that's now a barren wasteland after June's opening. Both these places would suck to live in for people who prefer to live in cities, but Persona 4's Inaba feels like a genuinely great place to live in for people who want to be a country mouse. They capture that feeling of a community, that this place is an actual town people live in rather than some place that the main characters happen to live in. This place feels alive despite being a town that should be dead. And that exact feeling of something feeling so real and alive despite taking place in a desolate setting is exactly what Call of the Night manages to accomplish. This anime manages to resemble that feeling of actually being the only ones awake at night. I've been there talking to my classmate at 3 AM about Street Fighter frame data outside just cause we both didn't want to go home yet. I've been to a restaurant getting breakfast with friends when we had no business being awake at that time because we were up all night grinding fighting games. I've been to my friend's house partying where we're so loud it feels like the neighbors will put in a noise complaint. It feels nonsensical to say this because I'm talking about the anime with a hot vampire that will take you back to her room and will only take your blood while you're dead asleep and not your wallet, no Cardi B, but the anime feels real. And while part of me says this because I desperately wish Nazuna was real, and if you happen to cosplay her and are interested in a dude who talks about anime online with like 200 YouTube subs, just know my messages are always open. I always preferred the night to the morning. It's much quieter, there's no such thing as getting stuck in rush hour. The city looks prettier when the sun goes down and the bright lights are all that illuminates the streets. Sure, some things suck, like food places closing, but those crappy overpriced hot dogs that taste like shit you'll eat when you're hungry and everyone else is closed weirdly taste better during the night. Of course, you could always be walking alone in the Bronx at 3 AM and get asked what size shoe you wear, so maybe the night is worse than the day now that I think about it. For someone like me who's been a night owl my whole life, you just get this anime. It feels like you've been there and can relate. Even with the main character and his main dilemma, getting overwhelmed and not wanting to deal with your problems, the night is perfect for that because everyone is asleep and no one really bothers you. That's one of the things I like so much about nighttime. Which is crazy because relatability and realism was the last thing I expected from the author of Dagashi Kashi. This was a GOG manga that would advertise and give fun facts about Japanese candy you had no clue about and did not care for. It's a series with extremely one-dimensional characters that never develop, and yet with the increase of a few pages it feels like Kotoyama was able to completely change the tone of their writing with their newest work. And I think the biggest winner from this is hands down the characters, because I think Call of the Night objectively has better characters. And I don't just say that because I think she is better than her, even though she is, and if you disagree you're wrong, but pretty much every character Kotoyama has written in Call of the Night is a major step up from the cast of Dagashi Kashi. Each character can be summed up in a single sentence. Kokonatsu is bland, so he can bounce off of a Hotaru who is outgoing and quirky. Basic best friend character, older character who is actually the most knowledgeable in the series but serves primarily as comedic relief, childhood love interest that's a bit of a tsundere. I find all of them to be boring because of their one-dimensional nature. This is unfortunately the effects of a comedy series. Characters can never really develop much because they have to stay the same for the sake of comedy. Again, someone like Darkness from Konosuba is like this and makes the same jokes repeatedly, and I own a figure of her in my house, so it all depends on personal preference if you end up liking them or not. In Dagashi Kashi, these characters never change as the story progresses, and Kokonatsu is probably the worst offender. Kokonatsu wants to be a manga artist and follow his dreams instead of taking over the family candy shop. They pretty much never talk about this because both it and him are not important. It's nothing more than a plot device so he can have a reason for not wanting to run a candy shop. But Call of the Night actually does stuff with its characters. Take the main character for example. While Kokonatsu being a manga artist is used as a plot device, Ko not wanting to go to school because he rejected a girl is used as a plot device instead. The difference between these two is that Ko actually changes as the story progresses. He is mostly depressing when the story first starts, but gradually over time he ends up becoming more assertive and confident in the way he speaks. He ends up becoming furious when those he cares about become threatened. He even ends up actually going back to school for a little bit later on in the series, to the point that the difference between Ko when the story first started and current Ko is night and day. Pun intended, I'm corny like that, I know. The story is about him learning to gain self-confidence and the series is actively working towards that goal. Not just him, but a lot of the side characters like Mahiru go through actual character arcs that are important to the plot and quite literally change their characters. They end up covering some heavy topics in the series as well. There's a ton of reasons why I think the cast of Call of the Night is objectively better. That's not even me being biased because I think on average they're more attractive than the characters in Dagashi Kashi. I guess if I were to sum it up, I would say more is better. There's more characters, they have more stuff going on with them that makes them in turn more interesting. They're deeper and more complex. Characters actually do important actions throughout the story with meaning behind them. They're more relatable. The list goes on, and this is the case for even the really minor characters like Shirakawa. She's an overworked office worker that's just really tired of her current situation. She doesn't really hate her job, she hates the amount of stress and time it puts on her mentally. She ends up being able to relate to Ko because she too loves the night. She loves how quiet it is and wishes she can run away from her problems like Ko does, but unfortunately she's an adult and adulting is cringe, so she must return. But this chance encounter she had with this middle schooler was able to help her out immensely mentally. All of this is just from the short 10 or so minutes of screen time she has in episode 6. She goes through a whole character arc in this amount of time, whereas in Dagashi Kashi, characters wouldn't even get this in the story's whole duration of 180 chapters. Call of the Night uses her to both change her personality and to help change Ko in the process, resulting in a very touching moment of relatability between the two. It doesn't feel like some silly side story that has no importance, but rather a very important moment that helps to further develop the characters and the world they inhabit. Call of the Night has purpose and meaning, which is again why I like it so much, because these are all things that are missing from Dagashi Kashi. I think one of the final things that Call of the Night improves on over Dagashi is change, because not only do the characters change as the story progresses, but even the series itself changes. Starting off being this very chill anime where nothing ever really happens, but then moving on to have more serious story developments down the road. And then next thing you know, the series will end up turning into a battle manga where characters are actually fighting for real. The story doesn't stick to the same beat, but rather it's constantly changing things up. Call of the Night starts off as a series where the main appeal is running away from all of your problems and escaping into the night, and highlights how cool that is. But as it goes on, the characters and the whole genre end up changing with the story, kind of in a way symbolizing how nothing can stay the same forever. In my opinion, nothing this series has going for it is exactly what I would define as peak fiction, except Nazuna.
またチューしてあげるからね。
Gee Willikers. Characters, action, comedy, none of it will make this series win any awards or crack any top 5 lists. But instead, everything about the anime is just solid all around. It's a very good and honestly great series, period. But it's when you compare it to what came before it, is when Call of the Night really shines and becomes something special. A series that doesn't stick to the same formula, a world that feels alive, relatable characters, serious tones, and overall pleasant and relaxing to watch. These are all things that are missing from Dagashi Kashi for me, and it's crazy to think that someone who made something I really disliked was also able to create something I would end up liking this much. It feels as though Kotayama took the same premise they initially had success with, a boring protagonist learning to fall in love with a girl that would change his life, and managed to create something that will probably please fans who were into the original while also creating a series that is completely different, that would also manage to capture a brand new audience, and the result that is Call of the Night is beautiful.